afternoon, everyone. I'm Rais Yawar. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Commissioners for Stringwood Park District. Hope you're having a great day so far. Is everyone having a great day?
Yeah.
Okay. A successful campaign persuades the majority of people to vote for your candidate. So how do we organize a strategic campaign? We mobilize, involve people, we plan, and we implement. Elected officials need to be accessible to their constituents. So as you heard from Sadia and so many other people, candidates need to talk to people and really listen to their concerns. So door knocking is essential because you're starting a dialogue with people. But we need to know, why people vote for certain candidates and why they won't for some others. So basically there'll be like three groups of people. One is, the support of your candidate. One is, another group supports the opponent. But there's a third group of undecided voters. These are the people that you need to work hard to get on your side or to, take a position and hopefully, again, vote for your candidate. And it's very important when you go door knocking and you're trying to engage, the swing vote, because these have decisive influences on the outcome of an election. So when you start a conversation, knowing exactly what to say, but more importantly, how you say is good. Keep them involved, have a conversation going. And a lot of times when people don't know you, they don't know what you stand for, of course they're not convinced to vote for you. So that's what you're going in to do. And of course we learn from history. When Jimmy Carter first announced his candidacy, people asked Jimmy who? But his sheer determination and an incredibly organized campaign made him go from peanuts to presidency. And recently, we have the example of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's my hero. She defeated a 20-year incumbent congressman, Joe Crowley. Her campaign video was simple and appealed to voters. Her theme was the courage to change. And she gave hope to the disenchanted and cynical voters. And her famous slogan was, "We have people, they have money." And yes, she stuck to it. Alexandria's campaign raised and spent $194,000 versus Crowley spending $3.4 million. I was shocked when I read this, and she still defeated him. She won by expanding the electorate. She engaged the millennials and knocked on thousands and thousands of doors. She won the primary with 57% of the votes, but the November 6th election, she won with 78%, which was over 100,000 votes, and her opponent, the Republican nominee, getting only 17,762. Phenomenal numbers, The prediction is that millennials will decide the 2020 election. They are the largest generation in the US labor force. As of 2017, 57 million millennials versus 41 million baby boomers in the workforce. And the millennials are as large of a political force as baby boomers, with both generations are about 31% of the overall electorate. But the millennials continued until 2016 to have the lowest voter turnout of any other age group. But this year, in 2018, 3.3 million voters for the age group 18 to 29 voted early. It was a 188% increase from 2014. And in some states like Texas, increased by 500%. And as Adia just talked about, the top three issues that are important to young people. One is climate change and the environment. Another is jobs and unemployment. And the third is the cost of higher education. And as Keith Ellison said earlier, maybe enough people have to form an organization to move forward and ask for their demands, ask for lower cost of higher education, as for the climate change and environment to be paid attention to. So we need to, people who are running for elections need to see if they can address these issues and engage the millennials. And the next and last one I'm going to talk about is political allies. These are the people who determine, the level of influence they're going to have on your campaign. So from the past experience I've had, start going, if you're going for a board, in a local board, start attending the board meetings at least 6 months before the election. I went to see what they were doing mainly, but also to introduce yourself to the group. Not your opponents, but there are also 10 other people that you'll be working with for the next 2 to 4 years. These people don't know you. You want to be at the table, but we need to convince them that you are bringing education, knowledge, integrity, and hard work to the table. They don't know you, and what they don't know, they are afraid of. I know someone who was qualified to be a trustee, and he was running for an unopposed seat. But because he had offended some of the, influencers, in the village, they made sure first that all his signatures were, challenged. Then they also made sure that they had an opponent, and they were all write-in candidates. And for a simple, I think 125 or 130 votes, he lost. Only because he didn't take the time to make sure that the leaders and the influencers in his community, not going to, a congressman, you're running for, a trustee of a village, make sure that everyone in that village, make appointments and go have coffee with the finance director, have it with the superintendents, have it with the, the president of the board, and go meet them and make sure that they know what you have to offer. So that's about all I have, and I let some of the other people who've got like wonderful experiences talk about it. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum everybody, and hello. I am really excited and very grateful to the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, and I want to add on to what Marisa and everybody is going to be saying today. I started off my journey in 2016 running for school boards because of the political climate at that time. Right? I had never ever run for office. I didn't know anybody, none of my friends or nobody in my community had ever run for office, and so it was kind of all very new. And then I realized very quickly that I had launched a 501c3 in the community and everything, and that I always thought was a team effort. But running for political office, I thought it was pretty selfish. I didn't want to build a team. I thought it was just me, myself, and I have to get this job done. And I don't want to ask anybody for any help. But very quickly, when I went on this journey, folks from the community, when they heard about my campaign, they came up to me and they said, "Who is your campaign team?" And I was like, wow, you need a team to do this. And yes, you do. You need a team. You cannot do this by yourself. It is a total team effort. And the first person in my team was my husband. And so I went over to my husband, Sajid, and I said, look, I'm getting on this journey, and I can't do this without your support. So he was the first person to sign my petition, knowing very well that while I am knocking on doors, that he's going to be taking care of our 4 beautiful, very young children. And so he was number 1 person, and your family is the first folks, the first 5 people in my team were my husband and my 4 children. And then I started building this team. And how did I do this? Since I live in Arlington Heights, I've been in Arlington Heights for 10 years. However, I wasn't very active in my community. I didn't know many of my neighbors because I was doing so much work statewide and nationally on different organizations as an educator, but I didn't have the time to really get to know my community. So the first thing was the intention. I always think when you run for office, like Keith Allison was saying, we're not running for that title, but we're running because we want to give back to our communities. And my full nia and intention was to get to know my community, right? That was my intention. And so I just started picking up the phone for my children's play dates, for instance, and all the moms I knew from schools to say, hey, you know what, I've been told I need a campaign manager. And right off the go, I started building this, what you call your kitchen cabinet. And it ended up being all the moms in my community who had never ever run a political office before. And so we did this, so we started up with this journey where folks said, hey Anisha, you're a first-time candidate in this very, Arlington Heights is an interesting community. It's not as diverse. I didn't know many Muslim community members in Arlington Heights. It's still not many. But, and they said, look, you're running this campaign, but you're not going to win, right? You're not going to win for the first time as a first-time officer. But this dream team, this kitchen cabinet, went ahead, worked really hard. They'd never done this before, and we ended up winning this campaign with the highest vote count in a very contentious run. And it was all because this team was out to do the work. So I want to share with you the members of my team that made a huge difference, and I think in building this team for yourselves when you decide to run for office. And I'm so excited that so many people, all the folks who spoke before us, Dilara, and so many people who run for office, right? And it took a team effort even for them, right? And so of course, when you have this, my most important person, I'll tell you, was my communications director, right? When Keith Ellison talks about crisis control, every campaign will end up in crisis. And my house ended up, the picture of my home ended up in the newspapers, all this crisis happened, and my the times when I couldn't think, Audrey Barcella was able to kick in and think for me and help me through these articles in the media and all the interviews that come with it, and our campaign, not our campaign, but the whole contentious run had been in the media so much. So we needed that communications director. Then my advisor, and when we talk about, when Ray's talked about building alliances, and when the question came about the LGBTQ, my biggest ally in the community, I had never met her before, is somebody from the LGBT community, and she's the president of the library board in Arlington Heights. Her name is Deb Smart. She saw a video of me at I happened to be at the library, and I just introduced myself on a Facebook Live, and she came out to me and said, look, I don't know you, I want to get to know you, and once she did, she's one of those influences in the community. And I think one of the biggest reasons this whole team took for us to win, but Deb Smart was a very key person who knew the community so well and introduced me to all the folks that I didn't know the mayor, I didn't know the trustees, I didn't know all the board people. So you want to know something, the influential people of any kind, right? This is about humanity, it's about getting to know your community. I wanted to get to know my neighbors. These were all my neighbors. I have lots of friends in Naperville, I have lots of Muslim friends in the community, but you see my kitchen cabinet is people in my community that I hadn't worked with before, but I started getting to know them. And talking about millennials, this young woman, she was a high schooler at that time, her name is Lillian. She was taking a gap year from her high school, and I met her at a candidate coffee. And right up, she was asking such intelligent questions. At the end of that candidate coffee, I went up to her and said, hey Lillian, would you like to be my campaign intern? And we had a lot of, it was during this campaign time, it's kind of sign war time, right? And so I was told, first I was told, oh, you don't need any signs, it's a small campaign. Then I was told, oh no, you need signs, so I got 100, and then I got 500. And Lillian was the one who put 500 signs, along with other people, of course, there's a lot of people involved, but the majority of the signs, Lillian was the one who did it. So I'd go meet somebody, I'd say, hi, my name is Anisha Patel, I'm your candidate for school board, and then we'd chat, and then they'd say, oh, I'd love to support you, and I'd say, hey, would you like a sign for your yard? I'm happy to get one. And they'd give me their address, I would text it to Lillian. Lillian, before the end of the day, would be at their house putting a sign out. So during our campaign, if you went to Arlington Heights, I'm ashamed to say my name was these signs were everywhere, and people still to this day, when I introduce myself, they'll be like, oh, I remember seeing your sign. So it was all Lillian, right? It wasn't me. I hardly put many signs up. It was Lillian who did it. And then, so that first call I made was to Trisha, and she's my friend Samara's friend's mother. Trisha lives in our community, and I said, hey, I need a campaign manager. She had never done this before. She said, yep, I'm going to help you. She figured it out. We figured it out. Nobody knew anything about campaigns. And she put calendars for me about all the community events that were happening in Arlington Heights. Every St. Patrick's retiree luncheon, anything that was happening was on my calendar. And so for 3-4 months, all I did, and I agree with somebody else who had spoken earlier, that when we are, as American Muslims and folks, when they don't know who Anisha Ismail Patel is, and may have never heard of that name, we just have to work 20 times harder, or 100 times harder And I know right from the get-go that no matter what, my intention, my nia was to get to know my community as an American Muslim, to sit at the table, and for them to get to know me and my community as American Muslims, I had to be at that table. And so I went to everything. And my husband, that first petitioner, Sajid Patel, took care of the family, and I was out and about 2 or 3 times a day out in the community at every event. And Tricia made that happen. I lived in our house for 10 years, and my neighbor Madeline, who I didn't know very well, but now we work out 3 times a week together, and she just texted me while I was at this meeting about bananas, so we're like thick friends now. But I didn't know Madeline, and I'm so grateful for this campaign because I have gotten to know my community so well. And the lady who lived across the street from me, who I wasn't brave enough to be like, hey, let's be friends. Now we're really huge friends. And she canvassed and knocked on more doors than I had. And so really, what I'm trying to say through all these people is tell you the personal narratives of how it takes people and relationships and relationship building. And so again, this whole campaign team, right? And it takes the intern, for sure it takes your family, and the fundraising portion. Right now, some of these races that you've heard of are bigger races. Now, something like school board, the fundraising or the friend raising aspect, for me the friend raising was really important. Building those relationships was really important. But the fundraising part, I felt really ashamed, like he was saying, to ask for money for my campaign. I just couldn't, but then I had to kind of get into it. But my friend Shazia in Barrington took over, and she said, look, don't even worry about this money portion. She took care of the whole fundraising aspect. She became the fundraising director, raised all the money, and therefore we were able to, we worked harder, we got our name out there more, we had more signs than anybody else, we raised more money than anybody else, and we also put out the mailer, which is very expensive, like Sadi was saying. We were, I think, the only school board candidate that put it out there. So therefore, we did. We won by a much higher count. You always need an accountant, as I called somebody in our community. He happens to be my cousin as well, and he's a CPA. And I wanted accounting of every single. I'm so glad I did, because after the campaign, the newspapers were calling as far as, who is this Anisha Patel? How did she win such a contentious? Where did your money come from? And we had a count of every penny and how we got it and how we spent it. And that's because of our accountant. And then even phone banking, right? My friend Madiha lives in Naperville, not even Arlington Heights. And she took care of all the phone banking. She delegated all the numbers. We had high schoolers and middle schoolers calling for us. And so again, the team, you take care of it. We had a website developer. She did all of it. My graphic designer, my Girl Scout troop leader for my children. And then this attorney that to this day I haven't met. His name, I didn't know I needed an attorney, but when Keith Allison said there's crisis control, my campaign got into a lot of trouble, because a day before the a week before the campaign, when I realized the sample ballot didn't have my name. I was like, oh, maybe this is how it works in America, that you run for an office and you don't vote for yourself. But it wasn't. It happened to be a big Cook County mistake. My name wasn't on the ballot. They thought I was in District 59 and not District 25. But all my neighbors go to District 25, all this stuff, confusion. So anyway, right from the get-go, you always need an election attorney. Even if you don't think one and you need one, you need one. So have an election attorney, meet the person, have them on standby, so if something goes wrong, then you can get it. So Mike Kreloff jumped in, he heard about my campaign, pro bono jumped in and said, hey, look, I'm going to get you out of this, and he solved the problem. It ended up being an 80-year mistake that Cook County had made. My board, because I ousted an incumbent, a very popular person, a very strong person in the community, so I ousted this person, but I think, again, I'm telling you, it wasn't because of just me, it was a whole team, right? So I even visited every faith institution in Arlington Heights. Let me see. So like every church, every organization, here's Lillian at the train station, every neighbor. So what you want to do to build this team, you want to sit down and you want to write down every single person who can help you. Every person you know, write them on a list. Even if you don't know them so well, like Madeline, my neighbor of 10 years, write their name down and then go from there and build your team. One-on-one coffees, like Maurice was saying, right? This is a village trustee, he's a Republican, a very strong Republican. I did not know this when I met him, so then when I was sitting with him later on, found out he's Republican, I thought I was sitting across an enemy. But I'm so glad I run this campaign because he is a good friend. He is a strong Republican and a good leader in the community. So that when Sadia was talking about leading across party lines, that's really important. So, and then you have folks who around the community will invite you for candidate coffees, but you really want to approach them. So you want to say something like, hey, if you want to host a couple of friends, I'm happy to come over. And people, once you ask, that idea goes into their mind, and then they'll execute. So I don't want to take up too much time because I know other people are in line to talk to. So bottom line is, it took a dream team of 75 people for us to get on a landslide victory, right? A journey that I thought I was supposed to do by myself, but no. So when I talk to other folks who ran super strong races this time around, really strong candidates, the one thing I felt that I want to continue to talk to them about is building this team. And so if you need any more help with this aspect or need any more convincing of why you need to build a team, I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Next, I just want to say, especially because I'll have to be away for the Q&A, but regardless, I'm available to anybody who wants to talk more about running or who wants advice or help. So all the organizers have my email address and myself with anybody who asks. And if there's a way that I can be helpful, or if you have follow-up questions that I didn't have time to get to, I'm available to everybody here. I actually was going to talk about something that very well dovetails with Anisha's presentation. You talked about how the next door neighbor has become a friend as a result of your campaign. You also talked about how your first core supporter was your husband and your next 4 were your children. And I wanted to say a little bit about the social and spiritual cost and benefit of running for office. And I'm going to say something now that I have discussed one-on-one with many candidates. I've never talked about in front of a group of people. Surprises most people when I say that every candidate I've ever seen. Running for office is lonely. It's strange, right? You're surrounded by people. You're a part of a dream team. If you want to be successful, you're the one who's doing the thing that you're doing. Everybody else is doing something very different, and it can be a lonely experience. It's also very difficult. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours. It's a lot of time away from the people who you love the most. And so I think it's very important before the campaign begins to design a campaign structure to keep you grounded and rooted in who you are and who you love most, and to keep you spiritually nourished during the difficult moments. To build a structure that says, I know I'm going to have less time with my spouse and children than I am used to having and than I want, but I'm going to figure out a way to build in time and to build in a mechanism to keep our relationship strong and our communication open, even if I'm away from the house more than I'm used to being away from the house. To build a campaign where the professional relationships you make are also personal relationships. With the time that you spend with the person who's going to help organize your coffees or design your fundraising strategy become human relationships that give you strength and give you energy. Because when that crisis comes, it's going to come at a time that you're tired. It's going to come at a time that you're busy. It's going to come at a time that you're under stress. It's going to come at a time where you don't have a lot of time to deal with it. And so you're going to have to draw strength from somewhere. And what you have to do is to build a campaign where the people around you are in real human relationships with you, and so you give one another strength. A campaign that is just in a spreadsheet, where you're taking money from people, and you're taking hours from people, and you're taking lists from people, but you're not giving one another support and encouragement and connection, is a campaign that lives in a spreadsheet. A campaign ultimately successful in the real world, in the human world, in the relationship world, And so these are difficult things to prepare for, but I think it's critical to do that preparation, to spend that time in advance and real conversations with your family about how it is a family undertaking. And if it's not a family undertaking, it's probably not an undertaking that's worth going through, because it could be one that hurts your family. But if instead it is something your family is engaging in together, then it's going to be a new and difficult experience, and you have to talk about what the allocation of time is going to be like, and how to protect time for all the things that are not a part of the campaign, but continue day by day. Your children won't stop having homework just because you're running for office. And your need to be a part of that process won't change just because you're running for office, but your availability will. Your spouse doesn't become your staffer. They're still your spouse. Your relationship is not about your campaign, your relationship is about your relationship. But they're all of a sudden spending a lot of time helping the campaign. How do you design that relationship so that you're still giving them first of all, what they need, but also what you want to be giving them as their spouse? These are questions that are easy to overlook because they don't live in the spreadsheet, and they don't help you hit a fundraising benchmark by a particular date. When your field person asking you how many doors you knocked on that day, that answer doesn't have much to do with your kid's homework. But they're also the most important questions. Not only because they're the important questions in order to keep you strong and successful, but they're also the most important questions because they keep you as you. One thing I've sensed during a lot of today, it's been mentioned explicitly, I think 2 or 3 times, but danced around a lot of times, is this question of, I know who I am, I know why I'm here, I know why I'm running. I look at politics, and people in politics seem to kind of be sellouts. They seem to forget who they are. They seem to forget what they're for. How do I set up my political decisions so as to ensure that I don't sell out? And I think these questions of how to make the campaign a human campaign, how to make the family remain a family and be a part of the campaign, these are questions that help you answer the fundamental question of how you be successful in politics and continue to maintain the core of who you are. So think about that in advance. So when the crisis comes, you won't have time to plan for it. Think about it in advance and build a campaign that leaves space for your spirit, for your soul, for your family, for the people you love, for you to be for those people who you love what they need from you. You'll be happier, you'll be healthier, you'll be a more effective candidate, and then when you win, you'll be the kind of elected official that you want to be. Thank you very much.
It's because it hasn't been talked about yet. My name is Mehrdad Azamoun, and I've been an organizer and proud to be part of the coalition. I want to say that even though I know this is maybe not the first, this is the second time, right? That
We did one last
training
year.
like this has come together. It's still, regardless, like for me at least, it's a dream come true because I've just been involved in organizing in the community for a long time. I myself have not run for office, but have been part of many campaigns, so many that I kind of have lost track. My day job and my night job often is I work for People's Action, so it's a national racial and economic justice organization based in Chicago. And we have about 45 people's organizations that are coast to coast. We're among the many organizations that helped flip the U.S. House. And I myself, in the last cycle, was door knocking all the way from New Jersey to Maryland to Illinois to Wisconsin to Arizona in favor of candidates who are progressive populists. So field is really, I'm a field geek, but I understood that no one else was talking about money, and so I just want to just give really a few bullet points at this point. It's a little distraction.
Hey guys, ladies, please.
So I want to talk first about mentality, because the nuts and bolts you can look up. There are wonderful trainings online from Democracy for America. I have worksheets and sample budgets and everything that I can pass out to you, but I think the most important thing is our mentality. Because I've seen Muslim candidates do this. I think if we were going and asking money for a masjid or for a Muslim organization, we have a lot of pride. when it comes to asking money for ourselves, suddenly all of the things that we are taught, whether it's by our native country or by the US, all those feelings of shame and lack of worth, those come up and we hide. We don't do it. We don't ask for money because we're not sure if we're worth it. And there is an absolutely severe cost to doing that. And I want people to sit with that for a little bit. Just to talk from my own personal example, I'm glad there's another Iranian in the room, Naima. So if you've ever offered anything to an Iranian, my whole family's from Iran, we were all born there, you know that it's a frustrating exercise. It can be a frustrating exercise. Or if you've ever tried to settle a bill after eating with the Iranian, you know it's a frustrating exercise because there is this cultural practice that we have that basically says, can you spare this Kleenex? I'm not really sure you can spare this Kleenex. And I'm going to play a little game with you until I'm sure that what you have to offer, you can actually have to offer. Other cultures are like this, I know we're not alone as Iranians. But I've seen that culture, I've seen that practice, because it's so ingrained in us, weave itself into politics. Well, can you actually give me that $25? Can you give me that $50? I'm not sure. And I really want to put that to an end, because when we do that, we're actually not empowering anyone, we're not empowering the other person, and we force ourselves into the mentality of begging versus investing. And it's essentially what Keith Ellison was saying to us before, that it's about not about them giving you money, it's about them investing in a vision, investing in your vision. And getting also away from, I've asked that person for money, and thank goodness, I never have to ask them again. That's actually not right. You will have to ask them for money over and over and over again. I've talked to anyone in the room who's actually run for office. It's not just, oh, thank goodness this is out of the way. I have to go back to them in the next fundraising cycle. So getting away from that one time into repeated things as well. And basically getting away from being timid and fearful and actually being confident in yourself, your campaign, the team that you've built. I love that presentation, and the vision that you have. So a few things on mentality, and really getting away from begging. Just a few nuts and bolts, and again, I have handouts on this, that you need a budget. You need to understand how much is it that you really need to raise. I'm assuming when you ran, well, I won't assume, but when you run for office, you have to get calculations of what your office actually costs. What is it? The people who have run and have run successfully, how much did they actually raise going back a few cycles? And you can get an estimate. And you can have your Cadillac budget. We have an office. I have 5 paid staff versus maybe a standard budget versus absolutely bare bones. The campaign will be run out of my house. The living room is our campaign office, and maybe I have 1 paid staff. So you have to make your scenarios budget based off. The most important thing is, you heard Keith Ellison talk about it, call time. Call time. So anyone who's run for office knows that phrase, knows that word, which suddenly comes to dominate their calendar, and it's all about calling every person that you know, and I have a list for you. A couple of people have referred to it. So it's not just the list of everyone that you know, but there's a $sign next to their name. The list of everyone you know and your estimate of how much they will give, not just once, but over the course of the campaign. And you call everyone on this list, you make time in your calendar to call every person on this list, and maybe you have a total, there's a total on this worksheet, and maybe you cut it into 4. You reach half of these people, and half of those people that you reach will actually give. I want to conclude here, but in this last election cycle, and we've seen this over and over again, partly because of Bernie Sanders and other candidates who have run before them, But often, you know, as organizers, we say, well, power comes in really in three forms. There's organized people, there are organized ideas, and there's organized money. And oftentimes, as people in the community, we think, well, we have organized people. We don't really have that much organized money. Yes, we'll give to religious institutions, but we won't necessarily give to people from the community and social action generated from the community. And I think that's really false. In this most recent election cycle, there were article after article that said basically the new answer to the Koch brothers, at least on our side of progressive politics, is individual fundraising. And that's been a new thing that I've been very heartened by to see in the last maybe 4 to 8 years. And I think when you look at things in the big picture and the fact that we can self-generate from our own community and allied communities incredible social change, that's not just incremental power, that's just not incremental steps, it is a massive amount of power that we are sitting on. So I would just push you to, again, get away from begging, get towards investment in your campaigns. Thanks.
So my PowerPoint was specifically made for those who are thinking about running realistically, those who are rerunning, and those who are already running. And the strongest part of any campaign, in my own opinion, after working on a field team and seeing how other teams operate, such as communications and finance, is the field team. Your campaign is only as strong as your field game. This right here is our Instagram. If you guys have Instagram, can you please get on and follow? And if you haven't liked our Facebook, it's the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, IL Muslim Civic Coalition. Please like it before you leave the room today. I'd appreciate it. So a little bit about my background. I was hired to work for Lauren's campaign, Lauren Underwood, Illinois District 14, as an organizer under the field team in late August, and was a staff member until December, until I joined the coalition. And I had previous organizing experience around single issue policies, so never around electoral politics. However, I found that when you're actually organizing, there isn't that much of a huge difference. You can take a single issue and make it into a platform quite easily. All the issues that I organized around were related to immigration and civil rights, which was quite different than Lauren's campaign, where we focused on healthcare, mostly, and healthcare policy, and that was her platform. So does anyone here actually know what field is? Like what is field and like what it consists of?
It's a good start. Maybe you should explain.
Okay. So what is field? There are 3 components to field. The first one is a win number. It means how many number of votes do you need to win? The second one is volunteer recruitment. How are you going to build your army? And how are you going to sustain it? And the third one is micro-targeting and consistent canvassing. Micro-targeting is when you come and think about the different people you're going to get, right? The different voters you're going to get. How are you going to find them? And where are you going to find them? Because we often see candidates talking to voters and taking pictures with them and kissing babies or whatever. And that's the definition of field, sure. But how do you know what doors to knock and what hands to shake and whatnot? So an effective field campaign will start with targeting the right voters when you create your persuasion universe. Just for time, I'm going to talk about one universe. There are 2 universes in a field campaign. There's persuasion, the voters you're going to persuade, and there is GOTV, which is get out the vote. That comes in the second stage. So when you calculate your win number, you begin by creating the persuasion universe. And that's what I just talked about. There are 3 basic ways to target the universe. It's by voting history. Voting history is considering if a constituent has voted before and when was the last time they voted. So we tend to look at a period of the last 10 years or the last general election, last 3 general elections, excuse me. Demographics, the age, their race or ethnic background, and their gender. And our campaign specifically micro-targeted middle-aged suburban white women who were considered part of the group that allowed the blue wave to usher into the suburbs of Chicago. And the last one is geography. And we all know what geography is, but what I mean by geography is prioritizing a high population precincts. This is a really important, if you're taking notes about this, is a really important thing to consider. Prioritizing your precinct. So the first method that comes with field, and the most important method, is canvassing. And we all know what canvassing is, right? It's going door to door. And I put up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's tweet right here because it went viral for the fact that she let the world know that that's how she won, right? She won by canvassing. She knocked on 120,000 doors, made 170,000 phone calls, and sent 120,000 text messages. And that doesn't even include the work that she and her campaign did to expand the electorate itself, by registering voters. And campaigning or canvassing is a campaign's most effective method, ultimately, in a municipal election, and most of you are running for in local politics and municipal elections. Candidates can expect to receive 1 vote for every 19 doors that are knocked on. Suburbs are the perfect place to canvass. So campaigns that, if you are running in a suburb, you should take advantage. Residences in rural areas can sometimes be a mile apart. And in the city, you have things like security doors that can keep you from reaching constituents. So phone banking. Has anyone here ever taken part as part of phone bank before? Done a phone bank? Run a phone bank? Yes, you guys have done a phone bank? Great. When the DCC came to train the Lauren Underwood team, they told us that the average voter during a midterm election needed 4 touches to go out and vote. What does that mean? Their door could be knocked on once or twice, and they could get maybe 1 or 2 phone calls, or maybe they could get 4 phone calls, whatever, at least 4 touches. And we took this to heart, This right here, I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's just, a constituent of ours, of many, of thousands, who either came to our office or posted on Facebook or whatever, just hated, right? Said, stop sending people to my home and stop calling, texting my phone. I've had enough. Sincerely, fed up registered voter. And I'm here to tell you that that's okay. If you are running an efficient campaign, you should want something like this, right? Yeah, you're gonna cast a broad net to get your win number. And you will have a small minority of people telling you that they're fed up with you. That's fine. The most important thing about phone banking and about canvassing and about the field game in general is morale. You have to keep up high morale. The quality of a call is important because unlike canvassing, you don't have that face-to-face connection. People over the phone are more likely to tell you how they feel. They're just more honest. So the meat of a phone banking conversation is asking the constituents about the morals they vote on and relating it back to a campaign. In my personal experience, texting has a similar contact rate to canvassing, about 1/4, 25%, in comparison to phone banking. So all 3 methods should be used to when you launch your campaign. So one small thing we did was that we reached out to different minority groups during the Lauren Underwood campaign, and it was actually quite difficult to persuade the consultants on the team to have these phone banks. I said, hey, like these are large populations that we should be reaching out to. And they were like, these populations don't vote, so Dina, no, you can't do this. You can't do a Muslim to Muslim phone bank. We find it offensive if you call someone named Hamad and say assalamu alaikum to them. We don't want to partake in this. Don't listen. I didn't listen to them. Like, I went and got help. I overcame this adversity with the help of my community. I told them I need help to do this, to make all 3 of these phone banks work. And they came through, 15% of the district was minority. And there were 12,000 registered Latino voters in that district who were not given any attention that they deserved. So by running these phone banks, we reached out to people who have never been reached out to before because they're not considered, because they don't vote. So consultants who are mostly, who are usually white and usually male, don't listen and don't take them into consideration.
Dina, can I just jump in real quickly?
Sure.
So when,
Oh yeah, this was Anisha's phone bank. Thanks, Anisha.
and Dina's strategy works so well because, and Mari can speak to this too, that when, usually you call people, it's so tough, nobody wants to talk, you get a lot of hang-ups, but when we called and we said assalamu alaikum because we knew the person at the other end was Muslim, it was a big conversation and they really responded extremely well, so I'm so glad Dina pushed for it.
For lack of time, with volunteer recruitment, I'm just gonna go over the basic things. The first thing is that the relationship needs to be intentional. It can't be transactional. They'll see right through it. So making sure that you are out there, when you ask that ask, you're asking it with sincerity and you're coming back again and again and again. And capitalizing on existing infrastructure of a local Democratic or Republican Party, because they'll help you with introductions and with expanding your network. And making sure that there's a collaborative effort with another campaign in the area that you can align yourself with, or that you already align yourself with, or with interest groups, such as the Sierra Club, such as Move On, Indivisible, they all have local chapters. If you are running, or if you are seriously considering to run in 2019, these are the steps that you need to take before you complete our intake form, right? Before you come to us and say, hey, I'm going to run, this is what you need to do. How much money do you have you have to consider this. How much money do you have allocated? What is your strategy for fundraising? Because if you don't have that money allocated, how are you going to get it? And is your win number realistic? And this concept of win number, I can help you come up with that when we have that intake interview. And what I mean by realistic is that will your persuasion universe have to pull in swing voters, or independent voters? Will you need to resort to registering voters like Ocasio-Cortez did in New York, or Beto O'Rourke did as well? So the first step to victory is a win number, and it gives you the linear path you need to actually realistically win, right? And the last thing I want to leave you guys all with is that the personal is political, so you should craft your platform around what moves you personally. Yeah. Oh, and for those running, I really recommend this website, traindemocrats.org. It's really user-friendly, and there are a lot of videos that can help you. The GOP has a training website as well. I'm nonpartisan, so.
Thank you so much.
Any questions specifically about field or team selection? I don't know. Yeah.
Dina, about the concept of win number. I don't know who came up with that, but how's that calculated, or how do you come up with that?
So So if you're running as a Democrat, you have to see in the district or the area that you're running for, you have to see how many Democrats there are, registered Democrats, and you have to look at their voting history. And then you also have to look at swing voters, because if you don't have enough Democrats to actually win, you have to look at swing voters. So people who have voted Democrat and Republican in the past 10 years, the last three cycles. Yeah. Or you look at independent voters, and it's quite easy to do in Illinois because people here, when you vote in Illinois, you don't vote by party. You just, vote as yourself. As
So
an
do
individual.
you utilize like software to do this, or how do you come up with that?
Yeah, so the Vote Builder utilizes the software for that. It's a program used by the Democratic Party.
So does the coalition have access to the vote builder and, drive van and all that, or whatever?
Does the equation have it? Yes.
The coalition have access?
The coalition I have access to both of them.
Okay.
So for small races, you could even look at the history, right, of
Yeah.
who won before and how many votes did it take.
Yeah, history as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Mario Delar, do you want to conclude us?
All right, well, thank you